I'm Karen Seaver, and I work at the Harris Center for Conservation Education, and I'm hosting the Zoom tonight, along with presenting a bit. And I'm here to host Andy Chapman, who's going to regale us with some tales of monarchs in their overwintering areas in Mexico. So much thanks to y'all for being here tonight. It turns out we have a lot of monarch lovers in the Monadnock region. So we have so many people from all over the place. So if you're not familiar with the Harris Center for Conservation Education, we're a nonprofit organization located in the Monadnock region of southwestern New Hampshire. And our goal is to help people fall in love with nature. And we do that through a three-pronged mission of land protection, conservation, research, and education for people of all ages. If you're local to us, we help to conserve and protect more than 25,000 acres of land from development. Much of it is open for hiking, birding, and other recreation. And we help to coordinate conservation research on those protected lands and throughout the region, and have a lot of community programs and education efforts centered around those areas. And we also do quite a bit of electronic programming, which you're here for tonight. And one more thanks to all our donors and supporters out there. And if you haven't supported the Harris Center in the past, hopefully you'll consider supporting us in the future. All right. And now for what we're really here for, one of the coolest bugs out there, the monarch. I mean, what don't they have going for them other than bones? I mean, really, they have it all. So right now, I'm going to toss it over to Andy Chapman, who's an educator locally, and he's going to talk about some monarch adventures he's had in the past. And then once Andy wraps up, I'll talk about some ways that you all can get involved with monitoring efforts in your own backyard and through organizations like the Harris Center. So take it away, Andy, whenever you feel like you're ready.
I am Andy Chapman. I am a retired teacher. I taught fourth grade in Jaffrey for about 30 years, starting in 1990. I got involved with Monarch Watch back in around 2000, and for the next 19 years, I would tag the butterflies that my students brought in as caterpillars, and we would tag them and release them. And I went to other classrooms as well and did the same. And it's been a great experience. And I was lucky enough to participate in a trip organized by Dan Bisacchio, who at that time was a teacher at Souhegan High School. He organized a trip to Mexico in January of 2011. And fortunately, my school let me go on that trip, and I had a great time. The pictures and video that you'll see tonight are some that I took while I was there. So thanks for joining me. Thank you to Karen and Brett for helping out with this, and to the Harris Center for all their help and inviting me to make this presentation tonight. There are 12, 14 reserves in Mexico where butterflies will tend to congregate in the winter months. Probably one of the best well-known is El Rosario, which is more or less in the center of this map. They're all in a small area about 60 to 100 miles west of Mexico City. They're in the mountains and the transverse neovolcanic mountain ranges, and butterflies tend to seek out the Oyamel fir forests in those mountain ranges. About 10,000 feet up the mountainside is where they like to go, and they congregate there by the millions and hundreds of millions, and it's an amazing sight. One of the great mysteries is how they know to go there, how they find that place and know that that's where they need to be for the terminus of their 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 mile flight, which in and of itself is quite an accomplishment for such a small organism. The first reserve that we went to was called Piedra Hirada, and this shows the a location of that reserve, kind of in the south, the bottom left side of the map here. Mexico City, you can see, is to the right. So it's about 70 or so miles west-ish of Mexico City, where we went for our first encounter. Um, it's just the sign. It seemed like a relatively new place when we were there. It was in the process of being developed and some infrastructure put in place. But when we were there, it seemed fairly new in that whole process. This is an aerial photograph of part of the actually Piedra Dorada Reserve where we were. Um, the brownish, which look like dead branches on trees, are actually roosting monarch butterflies, and this is the way scientists are able to determine approximate sizes of the overwintering population is by aerial photography, and then measuring the perimeter and approximate area of these different roost sites, overwintering sites. Um, I'll talk a little more about that later on. But depending on the size of the site that they're looking at, there can be 10 to, in some cases, 50 million butterflies per acre in some of these locations. It's really quite an astounding number of organisms. But they all congregate in these small, really very small areas within the forest. They search out very particular microclimate. Steelman is our guide. He's showing I was with a teacher and about a dozen or so of her students, in addition to Dan. So he's showing the students how to identify the Oyamel fir tree by the branch, is sort of a cross formed by the twigs at the end of the branches. This is as we're entering into the reserve. We haven't gotten to the butterfly part yet. Two gentlemen in the red sweater and then the green ball cap sort of towards the back were joining us on this tour. They are former loggers, as I recall, who lived in the area of the reserve and are educating themselves to become part of the group of Mexicans who sort of oversee and manage and best they can kind of help keep track of what's happening in these forests. They are protected, although there are still some illegal logging kinds of activities going on in some places. The protection of these forests is really a significant factor in preserving monarch butterflies, and there are a number of reserves, but there's also a large biosphere that has been established by the Mexican government to protect at least half of these noted overwintering sites. Although because of logging and other activities in the area, the numbers of overwintering sites for the monarchs has declined from approximately 30 in the 1970s and 80s down to about 12 or 14 right now. So it's really imperative that all steps possible are taken to preserve these sites where the butterflies tend to hang out in the wintertime. So we're going a little deeper into the forest now, and we're starting to see the butterflies where they are roosting. They tend to roost in clusters on the branches and the trunks of trees. Some of these branches can contain 10 to 15,000 butterflies. Some of the larger branches that just all glom on to a branch together and hang out there for the winter months. We were there on a relatively warm, sunny day, so there was a fair amount of activity that these butterflies were just kind of up and flying around quite a bit there. They do roost and hang out in these clusters, but they will leave the branches and tree trunks to go in search of water. There are not necessarily a lot of nectaring opportunities in this area, not a lot of flowers, and even if there were, you figure how many flowers would be needed to feed hundreds of billions of butterflies. It just doesn't really happen. So they're living for those 5 months on reserved fat stores that they have created on during their migration, but they have to be very careful about how to conserve that fat so they can make it through those months, those 5 winter months in Mexico. They will fly around. They do go find water when they can, but otherwise they're clustered together in these roost sites. The OML furs provide a very precise microclimate for the insects, for the monarchs. It's not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry, and that really points to the importance of an intact forest. Even thinning of trees can open it up enough to expose many monarchs to weather irregularities, more rainfall, more, it does snow, I think, at times in these mountains. So the more intact and tight the forests can be maintained, the better sort of protection umbrella the forest will provide for the insects to keep them alive through those winter months. There is a threat of predation, even though we know monarchs are poisonous based on the fact that they do eat the milkweed as caterpillars and take in those toxins in the milkweed plants into their bodies. The adults, of course, then have that toxin in them as well. But there are some birds in these forests that do find the monarch butterflies to eat them. And so again, the more intact the forests are, the more protection they are provided by the forests and the trees. Yeah. Okay, so I have some video. If your sound is up on your computer, you should hear some rustling sorts of noises. That's the butterflies. There are some footsteps and murmurings of people too, but I think we'll leave these guys here. As we were leaving the reserve in the bus, heading down this road,
They're all over the road.
there were some butterflies flying across the road. They were leaving their roosting sites and heading down the hillside looking for
Stick your
water.
head out the window.
Not too far.
There were traffic cones and police set up at either end of this stretch of roadway. And the deal was that any cars or vehicles that came through with the butterflies stuck to the grill or any place else on the car would be stopped and fined. So they take it pretty seriously that people are careful and protect the butterflies in these areas. So we were going very slowly in the bus so as not to smash into any butterflies. I'm going to leave Mexico for a short while, talk a little about migration. This is a map that kind of just shows some general migratory directions of the butterflies. The butterflies in California on the west coast tend to migrate south from Washington and Oregon State to the coastal or southern areas of California, although some will head down to Mexico from there. The bulk of the butterflies in North America, from Canada all the way up to the northeast where we are, head in a general south or southwest direction towards Texas and then funnel down through Mexico to get to these reserves. And when you consider they're coming from hundreds of thousands of square miles up north to an area no more than a couple hundred, if that, square miles in Mexico, it's really quite an amazing accomplishment navigating to that one locale. For years, it was not known where butterflies went. There was theories that they went south, but no one knew where. This professor of zoology from the University of Toronto took it upon himself to start to try to find out. He developed little tags that he put on butterflies. This was back in the 1930s, late 1930s. and put the word out and tried to get anybody who could find them to let him know. Took a while to kind of figure out how to really get the tag to adhere to the butterfly wing, but he finally figured it out. He stayed at this for a long time. In the early 50s, he and his wife continued with the tagging and decided that they would enlist the help of people, volunteers, to help with the tagging. And they got several thousand people to volunteer with the tagging and report results. And eventually they started to get results back from tags, butterflies that were tagged in the northern central part of the country, getting results back from Texas. So the theory that they were moving south certainly came to be true. Ultimately, a tagged butterfly was found in Mexico. And in 1976, the Urquharts did go to Mexico and did find some of these huge overwintering colonies. And he wrote an article in National Geographic that made quite a stir in 1976, because the question of where butterflies went was more or less answered then at that point. And doing some of the reading I did, I also got a perspective. There's a lot of help from Mexican government and the people who in Mexico who live near these reserves in terms of finding and protecting these areas. So it's important that they're a piece of this activity. Another aerial photograph of a large overwintering roost site of the monarch butterflies, and all what looks like the dead brown branches in the center of this slide are all roosting butterflies. This is a picture of me holding a tagged butterfly, one of the ones that I tagged when I was teaching in Jaffrey. I was participating with Monarch Watch. It's an organization at the University of Kansas, started by Chip Taylor in 1992. They sort of picked up where the Urquharts left off with their research, tagging butterflies and collecting the data of where the tagged butterflies are recovered, and try to put together information that can help researchers understand where butterflies are migrating from, that they reach Mexico, the timing and the pace of migration, population sizes and fluctuations and things like that. Monarch Watch also is involved with locals in Mexico, and when tags are recovered in the reserves in Mexico from butterflies that have died and are found on the ground, the Monarch Watch will provide them some money for those tags, and that helps to a degree to support the local economy. There are many people who live around these areas who've been their families for years and years and depend on the forests and farming around the forest for their livelihood. And that's one of the threats placed on the butterflies in that area is the logging, because that is a source of income for people who have, in some cases, no other jobs. So again, finding other means of employment for these people who live in those areas is an important pursuit by the Mexican government and other organizations that help out in these areas. One of the butterflies I tagged was found in Mexico. This is back in 2003. I tagged it in 2003. It was recovered in 2005 at El Rosario. So obviously it made the flight, but didn't make it out of Mexico. It died there, but it was recovered in El Rosario. That was exciting to think about that. Flew 2,309 miles. This graph shows the population estimates for monarchs going back to 1993, I believe, the winter of 1993. An accounting, a measurement of the area of the roost sites that butterflies are using. And as you can see, over the last 20-some 30 years, the general overall trend has been a reduced number of sites used by butterflies and consequently a reduced number of butterflies. rather dramatic, going back to the early part of the mid 1990s on the left side of this graph. So there clearly is a threat to monarch butterflies, both in Mexico and their overwintering sites, and in the north and the United States and in Canada, where they spend their summer months reproducing. Just some serious threats on the population due to agriculture, habitat loss, climate change, all of those factors playing a role in their population sizes. Springtime migration, after they spent their 5 months in Mexico, they do start heading back north towards Texas in early March. They will become more active in late February in Mexico, flying around, feeding, watering, mating, and flying north and looking for milkweed in Texas, and lay their eggs, and that population then dies. So those that were hatched out in New Hampshire, say in August or September of last year, are the ones that will be heading back up to Texas this spring. They die. That generation of eggs that were laid grows to adults, lives about a month. They fly a little further north, mate, find to lay eggs on. That population dies. The eggs will hatch, caterpillars grow, butterflies emerge, and move a little further north again. And this happens 2 or 3 times from the Texas group that originated this whole part of the cycle. So by the time the butterflies come up to our area, they are 3rd or 4th generation from those that left here this last fall. Another quite amazing feat, making it from here back down to Mexico, having no idea where that, many birds migrate by following birds who have been to the overwintering grounds before. Not so with butterflies, they find their own way. But how they know to go there is still just an amazing feature of the butterfly. Monarch, or the milkweed plant, I think we're all familiar with that. And I don't know if any of you have seen, some of you probably have a monarch egg on the underside of a leaf. There's a close-up of one. They're about the size of a sesame seed or so, but they're there if you look. The second reserve that we visited, a little further north from the Piedra Hirada Reserve we went to, is the Capulin Reserve. And it's in the red pin over on the left side of the map. And the sort of dark shaded green area up here is part of the a UNESCO Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve World Heritage Site. This was established by United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization. The Mexican government felt it was important to protect these overwintering areas. And so in 1986, they established some protected zones in the mountains where the butterflies overwinter, and expanded that to a couple hundred square miles in 2000. And then in 2008, UNESCO declared this a World Heritage Site, and is acting to help the Mexican government protect this site, which includes 6 or 7 or 8 overwintering roost sites for the monarchs. So this is our trek into the reserve. We got to ride horses up this 15, 20 minute, half-hour horse ride up the mountainside to get to where the butterflies were roosting. And as we were riding up the hill, the monarchs became much more prevalent. Saw more and more of them as we got higher up, and they're more or less everywhere in this stretch of our ride. And even on this fella, I was sitting down the hillside a little ways, I think working on painting some sign, but butterflies were there. Okay. So, as I said, monarchs from all across the central and eastern part of the country will fly down to Mexico. They use the sun to help them navigate. They also have been found to be able to detect magnetic field in the Earth's surface and use that to help them navigate, which is useful on a cloudy day when the sun is not so visible. But it's still just an amazing thing. They can navigate, but to know that this is the right way for them to be going is just an incredible thing that they can find, that they know where they're supposed to go somehow or other. And they do what they can to get there. They're opportunistic in terms of their movements. They move however they can, 25, 50, 80, 90 miles a day in some cases. They will catch thermals to reduce the amount of flapping that has to be done. They have to avoid predators. They fight weather. Have to find food along the way, and nighttime roosts. And they do need to have nectaring locations as they're flying. They of course need to refuel as they're flying, but they also don't want to have too much weight in their body. The excess nectar is stored as fat, which provides them a energy resource for the migration, but too much weight makes it harder to migrate. But they also have to be able to have a certain amount of stored fat when they get to Mexico to make it through the winters, because as I said, the feeding opportunities are minimal once they get there. So they have to be able to survive for 5 months with essentially not eating. So again, this points to the importance of the intact forests where those microclimates are just right for them, cool enough that they don't burn up too much of their fat reserve. So the last couple of videos that I have, I'm just going to leave you with here. They are just something that I took up on that hillside, and again, the sound that you'll hear with these is that of the butterflies. There's some soft chatter in the background, but the bulk of the sound that you're hearing is the butterflies themselves. I'm going to start it about here.
I think they're not in their clumps today. I think they're flying. Yeah. I mean, there's big clumps up there.
Yeah, but it feels like more spread out. And it seems like there's more here.
Christmas trees covered with vines.
So much jazz to that.
Oh, I can't wait to pick which one's going to be the background. That's for my computer, you know?
Exactly.
You know, Dad, I think the picture that you had of Benito is one that it looks like the same. I only use my own photograph. You only use your own photograph? Yep. She just poses the same in every picture, I guess.
Who? The butterflies? Yeah.
Or maybe I have your picture of her.
I guess I had a really good one that was totally profile. Yeah, it's one funny. Yeah. And it's like you see the color in her eye. We have one in my room. Oh. We have one in mine.
It's yours.
Right?
That's in my room. It's blown out.
Yeah. What's the
She's just such a
orange?
Oh, she's beautiful.
Those green eyes. Heather, don't move. These time of the year.
We were at this location for 45 minutes or more, and the entire time we were there, this is what we saw. So for a good hour, millions of butterflies leaving their roost sites, and I think they were just heading down. There's a little valley, stream valley, just off to from where we were standing. They were following that down to, I believe, a water source. But again, it was as you can see, a sunny, clear day. It was probably upper 60s, low 70s. They were quite active, and I think out looking for a drink of water. So this constant stream of butterflies the entire time we were there was in progress.
I got bit by, I think, no, recluse I wouldn't have an arm left. It was a black widow. That one, the one right in the middle, the collar, I'd say that tree is about maybe 12 meters. Yeah, probably 30 feet. 10 to 12 meters. 35 feet. Yeah. Yes, I think so.
That's more or less it. This is a close-up of a male. Last thing I might say real quickly, the male monarch butterflies can be identified by these two little black pouches down the hind wing, either side of the abdomen in this picture. The black veins on the wings are a little bit narrower than the female, lacking the pouch, and the veins on the wings are just a little bit thicker. So that's the distinguishing feature between the male and female. That's about what I had to share. So I don't know if there are questions.
Yeah, there's a couple that this might be a good time for a couple of these. One question was from Jeffrey R. He wanted to know about the videos, if the monarchs are always flying that much, or are there times where they're roosting?
Well, I think the bulk of their time there is roosting. The more they're flying, the more energy they are using. Like I said, we're there on a couple of warm, sunny days, and I think they just were getting itchy and a little more active. But if it's cloudy, if it's cold, they're just going to roost and stay on their trees as much as they can to conserve energy. So I think the bulk of those 4 or 5 months that they are overwintering is more or less sedentary in the roost sites. And that clumping together helps to conserve body heat and conserve energy, protection against predation, and just any weather events that happen. I read about a snowfall that hit these mountains. I forget how many years ago it was, but it was estimated that about 30 million butterflies were affected or killed by this storm. But when people went back a couple of days after the storm, most of the ones they thought were dead had risen up off the ground and were flying around. They can survive cold. Cold and wet is harder for them, but again, the importance of the forest is staying intact, so they'll stay in place and save their reserves, energy reserves is critical to their survival in the wintertime. So I think most of the time they are probably just roosting.
Okay, a couple more. Isabel was wondering about the coloration of the butterflies. She thought in a couple of the pictures that they looked more drab, not quite as vibrant. Did you notice that, or do you think that's like an artifact maybe just of like the light in the photos?
When the butterflies are roosting and even sitting on flowers around here, and they close their wings over the back, the underside of the wing is a lot less vibrantly colored. So when they're all clustered together and their wings are closed, it looks just more of a kind of a tan coloration, probably a little more camouflage. It makes them a little less obvious. And then with some insects that have like toxic qualities, Well, you guys, even those that don't, when they open up their wings, if they're being approached by a predator, this bright orange can be a startling um, signal to a predator and give the butterfly maybe just enough time to leave. And also, of course, the bright coloration acts as a warning. One thing I was reading that the monarchs that are moving north from Texas up through the central part of the country are feeding on different species of milkweed than we have here in the north. Um, and it was found that those milkweeds have a higher level of the toxins that the caterpillars take in to their bodies, which then makes them even more toxic. So the new broods of birds that are hatching out and trying to find food that eat them are really repulsed by the taste of those butterflies. So that offers protection also then for the generations that happen up here. So the birds will recognize that warning coloration and steer clear. And many of you probably are aware that another butterfly in this area, the viceroy, has coloration very similar to the monarch, although it is does not have the toxic qualities that the monarch has. So when roosting, the wings are closed; they just do not have that color visible.
Cool. And maybe one more for now. Brett wanted to know if you happen to see any tagged butterflies when you were.
No, nope. I looked. Monarch Watch. I forget the numbers. They distribute millions of tags to thousands of taggers, but I think the recovery rate's a couple hundred. I looked back for some past tagging recoveries, and each year it's I don't think it was more than a couple of hundred tags recovered out of the millions that are distributed. So nope, didn't see any tagged ones.
Yeah, it'd be kind of 1 in a million, quite literally.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, we got some other questions rolling in, but I'm gonna take the podium for a few minutes and talk about some monitoring efforts, and we'll try to leave time for questions at the end. And I'll put my email in the chat. If anybody, if we run out of time and we don't get to your question and you want to follow up with me by email, feel free to send me a message. So I wanted to talk about some things that the Harris Center is doing in our area, and some ways that you can get involved, because there seems like there's a lot of monarch loving folks out there. Oh, okay. So some of the things I'll mention here are actually things you can do totally on your own as part of community science efforts. There's so many fun groups involved in monarch monitoring, and there's so much information available on the web. So a lot of this you can do. I'm going to show you some tips about how to do it most efficiently, and then some ways that you can come to a Harris Center program if you want to participate with some other people. So Andy talked a bit about the complicated life cycle of the monarch butterfly. And I just want to say that I just found it astounding how an organism that's an invertebrate could migrate somewhere that it's never been. So I think what's really amazing is there's no round trip here. When they depart, New England or wherever you see them here in the Northeast or in North America, that's the last that butterfly is also going to see the Northeast. They're going to make it to Mexico over winter, and if they're lucky, survive to migrate northward into the southeastern part of the US, mate, and die. And like Andy said, then successive generations have to bring this incredible species northward. So there's a lot of challenges involved in monitoring this species, partly because of the complexity of its life cycle across multiple generations. And even within one generation, they have a lot going on. So there's lots of ways for you to get involved. If you're a plant person, milkweed is a powerhouse plant. And you can plant milkweed, and you can also count and monitor milkweed. If you're more into animals, you can take your pick. Do you like caterpillars, things with wings, or both? There's a lot of monitoring projects that are targeted at a lot of these parts of their life cycle. So that's fine, because the most important figure that I wanted you to see is, this one. This one's one you might not have seen before, the figure on the left. Did you know that monarchs are found not only in North America anymore? They're actually native to North America, but they've gone global. Well, not all across the globe, but they are native to North and South America. Now they're found, there's quite robust populations in Australia, New Zealand, island parts of Asia, and also parts of Europe, especially Spain. So another challenge with supporting monarch populations is they face varied threats throughout the globe. Habitat loss is a pretty common one. There's lots of pressures, not only here in their summering grounds, but also in their overwintering grounds. The map on the right shows some of the biosphere reserves that Andy was talking about in his part of the program. And even in those preserves, there's significant logging pressure. This is from an incredible book. If you haven't read it, read it. It's Monarch and Milkweed by, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Agrawal is the last name. Incredible book. And this figures from there, talks a lot about the unique pressures that monarchs face. So they definitely could use some help. I got a great video submission from Tony. I think Tony's in the house tonight. So it might not want me to play your video now, Tony, but thanks for the submission. Because I switched to PowerPoint, and I think when I did that, it deregulated the video. But thanks again. Tony sent me an awesome video of Western monarchs roosting in California. So I always appreciate any monarch tidbits you have to send my way. Andy talked about, and there I saw a question come in about how do you measure overwintering monarchs? They really are, they've come up with a model where they approximate the density of the number of individuals on the OML fir branches, and then they measure that by area. And they come up with a hectare. A hectare is 100 acres. Who knew, right? A hectare is about 2.5 acres. And it turns out for monarchs, the magic number is 6 hectares. If the population covers 6 hectares or more, it's doing well. If the population is below 6 hectares, not so well. So where are we now? In the not so well category. Here we've had a couple years where we're close to 6, but for the most part, far below that. So like Andy mentioned, the tag recoveries are low. It's worth doing, and I'll talk about that here in a sec, but tag recoveries are low. They're usually about 1% of monarchs that are tagged get recovered, and that's of monarchs that are wild. Monarchs that have been reared by humans in some capacity, their survival rate is even lower, and the tag recovery of them is only about 0.5%. So kind of what Andy was talking about, we have to tag a lot of monarchs in order to get a hit. And I haven't been so lucky, but I'm going to keep trying, and I hope you will think about doing that too. At the Harris Center, we monitor for monarch larvae and their obligate larval host plant, milkweed, in July. So check out the Harris Center events calendar if you want to come out with some of these fine humans and help count milkweed with us. So shout out to Emily, who I know is also in the house. So it's one of the most fun things you can do. And Susie couldn't be here tonight, but she's a great milkweed counter too. It's really easy. You can actually do this. Do you have milkweed in your backyard? You can become a monarch monitor. There's tons of information. I put the link here, Monarch Joint Venture. And the project that this is called the Monarch Larvae Monitoring Project. So you can help gather data by counting milkweed plants and also eggs, caterpillars, and adults that are found on those host plants sort of at high summertime. And then we also at the Harris Center coordinate monarch tagging. Here's our presenter tonight, Andy, who came out at our event in September at the Harris Center Hiroshi property. We didn't get that many monarchs, but we had fun, and we had a lot of sort of demonstrations about how to handle monarchs. You can hold them, you have to do it carefully with clean hands, and it takes some gumption and some skill, sort of to do it carefully. But really, anybody can do it if you really want to do it. Here are my top 3 picks for how to get involved if you want to sort of follow some links and you want to sort of gather some information on your own. Monarch Watch, this is where you order your Monarch tags. And you can submit your tagging data and review tagging data there. They also have a connection for milkweed, to buy milkweed. They also have connections if you're at an education center or a nonprofit. You can actually ask and submit a request for free milkweed seeds. So check out that organization. They're awesome. Joint Venture is sort of this collaboration site where you can find out a lot of protocols for monitoring all over North America for all different life stages. And if you're really into the migration part of things, check out Journey North. They're a great organization. If you want to be like a citer, cite the first monarch of the season in a particular area, that's where you want to submit that data. So 3 really awesome kind of collaborating organizations that are involved in monarch monitoring, and the Harris Center, we're trying to get in the mix with a lot of these programs as well. So feel free to let me know if you got any questions. One last note is, somebody put this in the questions too. Beware catalog caterpillars. Their genes are confused and they have a really hard time surviving, let alone migrating. So if you do want to rear monarchs in your home, take wild caterpillars, wash your milkweed so that you reduce caterpillar exposure to pathogens, especially OE, which is a protozoan, and consider rearing your monarchs outside. There's a lot of interesting data out of Monarch Watch that caterpillars that are reared outdoors survive far better than caterpillars that are reared indoors. And that's probably because of exposure to ambient temperatures. So it involves a lot of sort of, they become your pets for a while. This is my son, Teddy, and this is the face you make when you have to release the bug that you've been nurturing for 6 weeks in your house. So it is responsibility, but it can become a great way to sort of get up close with an awesome insect. And then here's some information about Harris Center, about some upcoming dates to sort of keep your eyes peeled for. So that'll be coming up on our calendars for the summertime. And then my email is also on this page, seaver@harriscenter.org. So I think I'll stop there. Sorry about the PowerPoint snafus, but we got a couple minutes if we got any questions. Brett, do you see any that we should particularly cover?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions. Everyone's really interested in this. There's some questions about like, what's the most helpful thing? Is it raising them? Is it raising and tagging them? Or is it catching them and tagging them? Do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to have like the greatest impact, plant native plants, because that's going to be the thing that supports all the populations, not only of monarchs, but other pollinators too. So that's a really important one, is milkweed, and other native flowering plants. The other one is, just tagging even wild monarchs that you catch with a net. That's pretty, minimally invasive. It becomes more potentially problematic if you engage in the indoor rearing. At the same time, you can rear lots of caterpillars that way that are fairly protected from predators. So I think there's lots of things that you can do. It sort of depends on sort of what your level of commitment is,
Right. This isn't about monarchs, but there was a question back during Andy's talk about whether there are other butterfly species that migrate. Do either of you know about that?
I don't know of any long distance migrators like the monarch, but I know there are like green darner dragonflies that migrate a long distance, but I don't know, there might be. I'm decidedly not a butterfly expert, so not sure on that one.
I thought I remembered reading about another species is nowhere near the extreme lengths that the monarchs go to, but moves south. But I don't know if that's to they can find a place to overwinter that's more less wintry than up here, or what.
Yeah.
And I can't remember which butterfly that was, so I'm not helping much in that regard. But I think there is one other that does a short little distance
Yeah,
migration.
Phil's writing in the chat about how sulfurs migrate down the East Coast. So thanks,
Okay.
Phil. Yeah, so I think
I-
there's like more short distance stuff. I don't
Painted
know
ladies,
about,
yeah.
Out
inter.
west and maybe on the East Coast too, painted ladies. Yeah, thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, I've seen some painted ladies, American ladies. I thought that's what it was. Yeah.
There's a question from Jeffrey about, do they exclusively feed on common milkweed or all of the milkweeds?
What I found, there's 100 or so species of milkweed in North America, and there's about a dozen that are used by the monarchs, is what I found in my reading.
Yeah.
So it's not all species. Up here, it's the common milkweed. And I think too, the swamp milkweed is another one. But out of 100 or so, I read there's just about a dozen or so that are used by the monarchs.
And common milkweed is probably the one that is like, there's nothing, even though it has the name common, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a great supportive plant. And one other thing on that note is black swallowwort is an invasive plant that is confusing some monarchs because it has some milkweed appearances. So that is a really an invasive plant to be aware of and to eradicate if you find it, so it doesn't, because monarch caterpillars will not be able to eat that plant as a host plant. So we want to eradicate that so they don't get fooled. All right. So
There's
I think
Oh,
go ahead, Brett.
There's one more that I think you could
Yeah,
answer
sure.
quickly, which is about the rearing. And someone's
Mhm.
asking, would they be okay in a cage outside? Is that preferable to bringing them in your house to have like an enclosure for them?
Yeah, you can do it. I mean, that needs small mesh, but like one of those mesh butterfly houses. What we've been doing at my place is we've just been putting it on the porch. And usually they have like a loop on it, so you can like wind it around something so it doesn't get blown in the wind or something like that. But even just like having them on your deck or on your porch, as opposed so that they get some exposure to diurnal temperature variation. And I saw one other quick question that's easy to answer. I don't know if this person is still here, but eclose is the fancy word for come out of the chrysalis house. Eclose. So. Thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks, Andy. Great job, Andy.
Thanks to Andy
Thank
and
you.
Karen.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks to Brett for helping hosting
Brett,
tonight.
thank you.
Yeah, for everybody for being here. Yay, Monarchs. Long may they reign. And I hope you have a great rest of your winter and that the winter really comes and stays a bit. But I hope our paths cross in the future, y'all. All the best to you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.